Yep. Okay. Are we online, Wendy?
We are, yes.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. And so we move on to this afternoon's applications. So we're on to agenda item 12, planning application 251034 FUL, the Sea Shanty Branscombe, pages 125 to 146 in your agenda pack. And Andrew Digby is here to present the report. Over to you, Andrew.
Should a roll call have been done?
Do we need to do another roll call, Wendy? I think everybody's... Oh, Bethany's gone.
I do think we need to ask declarations from Councillor Brown because he did come in.
Yes.
Oh,
Midway.
yeah, we missed that. Yeah.
Councillor Faithful didn't get a chance to say either, did he? Councillor Faithful as well. He didn't get a chance to do to say.
I think you asked.
I
him.
think I did
Yes.
ask.
Nobody, I think he said just give you a minute because he.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You did.
You asked
yes,
him immediately.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. Before we start this afternoon, then, does anybody have any declarations of interest? Councillor Heath, you have any declarations of interest to declare? No. Yeah. No, that's understood. Yeah. No other interests though. Okay, and so in terms of roll call, I think we note that Councillor Collins has left. Bethany Collins, yeah. Okay. So, right, over to you now, Andrew.
Good afternoon, members. This is an application for a mobile sauna unit at Branscombe Beach. It's a retrospective application. The sauna has been there a little while. It's attracted a lot of public support. We've had over 90 comments in support, commenting on its contribution to wellbeing, tourism and the local economy. And it's also supported by the parish council and ward member. The reason it's at committee is because of concerns we have about flood risk, principally, but also landscape impact. This is a fairly recent aerial photo, so we can see the sauna here. There you go. So that's zoomed in. There's the sauna with the site outlined in red. And for context, you've got the Sea Shanty Cafe here, the car park, the Southwest Coast Path.
We haven't got pointer either.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. We call it really windy.
Only today.
Yeah, so we've got the Sea Shanty Cafe, the car park, the Southwest Coast Path. Some huts along the coast here as well. And just on the edge of the beach here, some picnic benches, which we'll see in the photos. That just shows you where the site is again. And here we have the flood risk, which is the principal concern. So the site is in flood zone 2 down here, but surrounded by flood zone 3 in the darker blue. It's immediately adjacent to a watercourse, and the Environment Agency have told us that it's subject to rapid and unpredictable flooding. In their words, they've described it as being very flashy. So this means it can rise with no warning, particularly during storm conditions. For additional context, although this doesn't necessarily contribute directly to the flood risk at the moment, it's in a coastal change management area, which indicates that it's at long-term risk of erosion and instability. So going back to the flood risk, we had a flood risk assessment which the Environment Agency objected to for various grounds, and we recently received an update to that. So it was a revised flood risk assessment and flood emergency plan. The plan addressing one of the objections from the Environment Agency that there was inadequate mitigation. The Environment Agency have commented on that latest submission, and it's not in the report, so I've got an update here from the Environment Agency. I won't read the whole thing, but the key points they make are that it relies on product 4 data from the Environment Agency, which shows tidal and fluvial, so river and sea flooding depths. But so it relies on those to determine what the level of risk is. But the Environment Agency have told us that that data shouldn't be used in isolation to determine the risk. It only represents a snapshot in time, and so it may be different to what is shown on there. They've also said that the floodwaters will want to naturally reoccupy a more natural course to the sea, a course that may differ from that indicated within product 4. So the information that the revised flood risk assessment is based on is not a reliable assessment of the risk. The Environment Agency go on to say that the mode of fluvial flooding, river flooding, in extreme events is very likely to be chaotic in nature. Regarding the tidal flood risk, the flood depth maps don't account for wave action, and so they're not an absolute representation of the risk, which is why the product 4 flood depth maps are different to the flood zone map, which you can see on the screen, which shows a greater extent of flood risk. So they previously told us that they were unable to provide flood warning service or severe flood warning for the site, and they've reiterated that. And that's because there are no flood warning gauges. And of course, it's difficult to provide warnings when there's a rapid and unpredictable risk of flooding from the river. So they say they can provide flood alerts, which give an alert of possible fluvial flooding, and they're issued based on forecast rainfall amounts that may or may not arise. They say the risk would be highest when a localized short duration intense rainfall event occurs, i.e. a thunderstorm. And in such circumstances, the onset of flooding would be rapid and provide the proposer with limited time to react to rising water levels, possibly in the region of tens of minutes, if that. Floodwaters are likely to be debris-strewn and chaotic in nature in extreme events. They highlight that the applicant's submissions has not explained what trigger they would use to investigate the evacuation of persons prior to flooding. Sorry, to instigate the evacuation of persons prior to flooding. They also comment on the lack of past instances of flooding, and they are of the view that that should not be construed as meaning that there's no risk. I'll read out their conclusion in full. It's a few sentences. To conclude, therefore, we would advise that the recently submitted FRA does not adequately consider the risks at the site, especially considering the dynamic nature of the landscape. The FRA is a desktop study which has failed to adequately demonstrate the risks to the site over the lifetime of the development, and therefore does not form the best available data on which a planning decision should be made. The structure is particularly vulnerable in localized, very intense rainfall events, similar to the famous Boscastle event. It would be our advice that the applicant takes a more sequential approach to the siting of the structure, even to slightly further inland, where the flooding is only from tidal sources, rather than both tidal and fluvial. So on that last point, this map shows the risk of flooding from the river and the sea, but I can just draw a line on here. So this roughly indicates where the risk of river flooding is located. So outside of those zones, there's a risk of flooding from the sea, but the risk of unpredictable flooding from the river is avoided. Moving on, here we can see, let's put the laser pointer on again. Here we can see the sauna just on the edge of the beach with the watercourse coming in to meet the sea. And we've got a series of shots moving around the beach. So in this view, we can see the issue that the Council's landscape architect has raised, which is partly to do with the position, but also the materials used, in particular the shiny metal roof and the metal flue, which make it more conspicuous. He's also commented on its relatively isolated position compared to existing buildings at the site and how it introduces commercial activity into an otherwise undeveloped part of the beach. Just on the subject of emergency access, this is the ford where the emergency services would need to cross to reach the site. So we recognise that there is a lot of public support for this, and indeed we would support a proposal in an appropriate location. But there are serious risks here that has not been assessed properly in the flood risk assessment. We don't have an adequate mitigation plan. And more importantly, we don't think that, based on the Environment Agency's advice, that a plan can be devised that would be appropriate. So while we're supportive in principle, we have serious concerns about the risks to both the people using the sauna, the people operating it, and the emergency services who may be called on to rescue people. These are significant concerns and, in our view, outweigh the benefits. So the recommendation is to refuse for two reasons. The first being the flood risk concerns, the second being landscape. Since this slide was produced, we've had an emergency plan submitted, so that would be slightly amended to say that the submitted flood risk assessment and emergency plan are inadequate rather than absent. So overall, the recommendation is to refuse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So first we'll hear from Branscombe Parish Council, Councillor Mike Pellet.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on behalf of Branscombe Parish Council in support of this application, which, as you're obviously aware, we supported in our consultation response. I actually, first of all, address the second reason for refusal in terms of the description of the sauna as introducing commercial activity into an area valued for its open coastal character. Just should be aware there has been small-scale commercial activity on the beach for many decades in the form previously of fishing activity and its associated fixed infrastructure, the winch, etc., which was there until about 4 years ago when that activity ceased due to the operator's ill health. And during that time, the presence of that activity on the beach became to be considered part of the iconic character of Branscome's beach. And in comparative recent history, pedalows were rented from the beach as well. So this development carries on a long history of small-scale, low-impact commercial operation on Branscombe Beach, which supports the sole economic activity in the village, tourism. The assertion that the development fails to conserve or enhance the landscape is a matter of judgment, and you'll see that many supporters do consider that this development does in practice enhance the landscape. Moving on to the flood risk concerns. The report states that the Environment Agency has confirmed that no flood warning service is available for this location. Yet, that report omits to include the following sentence in the EA's updated consultation response, which states, "We can, however, provide flood alerts which give an alert of possible flooding." So, the statement in the report that the risks to life are unacceptable and cannot be mitigated through conditions or minor design changes is clearly extremely strong. And members will rightly need to be convinced that this overstates the case in order for you to approve this application. So not only is a flood alert service available for this site, providing a risk mitigation that is not noted in the report, but no fluvial flooding has occurred at this site, despite flooding higher up the watercourse. The applicant has made clear that the sauna will be relocated to a safe location if there is any risk of fluvial flooding or sea flooding. And it should also be noted that the applicant has full public liability cover. And if there were unacceptable risks to use of the sauna, surely such cover would have been refused by the insurers. With this facility already being highly popular and valued by residents and visitors alike, the Parish Council would therefore respectfully ask that the committee approves this planning application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you mind just turning the microphone off?
Sorry, Chairman.
Yeah, I take your point about the flood risk alerts being available. I think the report does acknowledge that, and also goes on, I think, to distinguish between flood risk warnings and flood risk alerts. So it is acknowledged in the report, the difference between those. Okay, who's the next speaker? I've lost me. Mr. Dalton Aram. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Strategy 33 of the local plan supports and facilitates high-quality tourism that promotes and is responsive to change. Policy E20 permits the provision of new tourist facilities, while Policy RC4 provides support for outdoor recreation facilities on the coast where the activities require a coastal location. Traditional saunas are increasingly popular in coastal areas due to the unique experience and the associated health benefits, where as part of the activity, patrons submerge themselves in the sea. The applicants originally approached the council to site the sauna in Seaton, but due to a lack of progression, they sited the sauna on privately owned land at Branscombe. The council claims the proposal introduces commercial activity and that the coast is undeveloped along Branscombe Beach. However, there are existing commercial uses associated with the sea shanty, several chalets and beach huts to the east and west, excuse me, and a large caravan park along the cliff edge. The council contends the sauna detracts from the natural beauty and tranquility of the setting. However, the World Heritage Site Jurassic Coast team states, the position and nature of the sauna creates no other actual or potential threat to the geological heritage features of the World Heritage Site and is in keeping with its setting. Several locations along the Jurassic Coast in Dorset homes similar saunas, which are popular additions to the public use of the seafront. These operate in line with management policy for the World Heritage Site, which strongly encourages proposals to promote the Jurassic Coast as an area supportive to well-being and or health, end quote. The sauna is located in an area affected by fluvial flooding. However, the EA's Product 4 data shows the site is not at risk of tidal flooding, and there have been no documented flooding events. A sauna on Weymouth Beach, which is in a high-risk flood zone and at risk from tidal flooding, was deemed to be acceptable by the EA and Dorset Council as it would not be used as accommodation and be mobile so it could be removed. It was also classified as water-compatible development being associated with water-based recreation. The officer contends that the Weymouth sauna is not directly comparable. However, several other beachfront saunas have been permitted in both medium and high-risk flood zones in Dorset and elsewhere in the country, including one at West Bay, which is a minimum of 300 metres to any area not in a high-risk flood zone. The Branscombe sauna is designed to be towed from site and its users evacuated to a safe refuge in the event of flooding and storm events. The applicants are signed up for warnings and they monitor weather and shipping forecasts to protect their significant capital investment. We consider there to be no significant or serious harm in permitting the sauna and that any risks can be appropriately managed. Consequently, we would respectfully request that members approve the application as it would promote tourism, well-being and health benefits on the Jurassic Coast. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, the ward member, Councillor John Heath.
Thank you, Chair and fellow councillors. So my response to the executive summary on the committee report is where it says this application seeks retrospective permission for the siting of a mobile sauna unit at Branscombe Beach. Whilst the proposal has attracted overwhelming public support and praise for its contribution to wellbeing tourism and the local economy, the planning assessment must weigh these benefits against the serious environmental and safety concerns associated with the site. The sauna is located within a highly sensitive coastal landscape, including the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site, East Devon National Landscape, and a designated coastal preservation area. It occupies a visually prominent and undeveloped part of the beach, where its presence detracts from the natural beauty and tranquility of the setting. The design, whilst modest, introduces commercial activity into an area valued for its open coastal character. My response is the sauna will be sited on land adjacent to the sea shanty, which is a raised area. Not only is the sea shanty a commercial operation, being a cafe, but so is the car park, the caravan site located above the beach, many of the beachside chalets on holiday lets, Great Seaside Bed and Breakfast and the Branscombe Brewery, all within 200 metres of location, that is on land adjacent to the sea shanty. Then the executive summary says, more critically, the site lies within flood zone 2, with access routes through flood zone 3, and is adjacent to a watercourse known for rapid and unpredictable flooding. The Environment Agency has confirmed that no flood warning service is available for this location, and the submitted flood risk assessment fails to demonstrate that the development can be made for its lifetime. No emergency evacuation plan has been provided, and the risk posed by erosion, ground instability and flash flooding remain unresolved. My response is the portable sauna is adjacent to the sea shanty on land in their ownership and is easily removable to a safe location in the car park where other fixed structures are already located, for example, payment machines, in the event of forecasted bad weather, taking advantage of much improved forecasting in recent years. The executive summary goes on to say, although the ecological impacts have been screened out under the Habitat Regulations assessment and are considered acceptable, and the sauna's recreational value is widely recognised, the proposal cannot be supported in its current form. The risk to life is significant and cannot be mitigated through conditions or minor design changes. No one has ever lost their lives or have been adversely affected by flooding on that part of the beach. You would have to apply the same rationale in respect of flooding as you would the sea shanty and other dwellings within that catchment. In conclusion, the executive summary says, while the sauna is clearly valued by the community and offers genuine benefits, its siting within a vulnerable and protected coastal environment renders the development unsustainable. The application is therefore recommended for refusal. I've responded to that. I would remind planners and the planning committee that this is a portable, easily removable hut where the applicants have stated that they will ensure the facility blends in harmoniously within the environment. There appears to be a considerable dichotomy between the wishes and feelings of the District Council, the Parish Council and many local residents, notwithstanding 2 objections, and the designated planning officers. The portable sauna is adjacent to the sea shanty and will be on their land and is therefore easily removable in the event of bad weather. The owners have stated as much in their submission. So in summary, this is a mobile sauna facility which has no impact on the ecology of the area, and therefore any refusal is an unjustifiable decision in my opinion. I would remind planners and the planning committee that this is a portable, easily removable hut where the applicants have stated they will ensure the facility blends in harmoniously with the environment. It will be no more unsightly than the cafe or the car park adjacent to the cafe, or some of the holiday chalets, being a portable type chalet size in its own right. And since this is a retrospective application, the quality of the sauna and its minimal visual impact on the environment is already demonstrated. I just want to add one thing to this. There was an email sent on the 13th of November from the Marine Licence Advisor, the Marine Licensing and Consenting, Technical Services Navigation, where it says, "Dear East Devon Planning Team, thank you for your email. The Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, MCA, serve as statutory consultees and primary advisors to the marine licensing regulators. Our responsibilities encompass a wide range of areas, including the safety of navigation, search and rescue, environmental quality, counter-pollution, ship standards and seafarer safety and health. Upon reviewing your project, it appears to be above the mean high water mark and is unlikely to impact shipping and navigation. Given this, the MCA will not be providing further comments on this project." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Heath. Okay, I think we've heard from everybody. So questions? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if I could ask the applicant, can he confirm that while people are using the sauna, there is always someone on site to act and look after them?
The applicant's not here, but I am. Yes, as far as I understand, that is the intention, that there needs to be someone there to operate the sauna when it's during hours of operation, so they don't just let people use it unsupervised.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at this, places users in danger. Well, that's a very broad statement. So could the officer explain to us what particular danger the occupants would be in, please?
The Environment Agency have explained to us that there is an unpredictable risk of flooding from the river. So river levels could rise quickly. People may not be able to respond to them quickly enough. People in the sauna may not be in a position to act or even to know what's going on outside. In the event of a flood, although the site is in flood zone 2, the access is in flood zone 3, they could be stranded. People may not be able to get to them to help. The sauna, if flood levels rise to a sufficient degree, may become unstable. There are various risks here that aren't addressed in the submission at all. Not only have the risks not been addressed, but the mitigation has not been put forward. So we just don't know that people would be safe in there.
There's lots of maybes in there and lots of ifs and buts. We've just heard from the representative of the applicant that there will be someone there full-time looking after this sauna when it's in operation. So surely that person, whoever he or she may be, will be aware of their surroundings, be aware of this flood's coming, which will give plenty of time to evacuate the sauna, which I guess would only take 10, 15 minutes to go to higher ground. So I can't see personally that there's a significant danger to anyone, as long as people are paying attention and doing what they're supposed to do. General common sense. Thank you, Chair.
I think the approach to emergency risk is usually to take the precautionary principle, Brian. you know, it is, if there is a risk to life and limb here, that you don't put people in that position. So it's not necessarily subjective. But yeah, I mean, I think it certainly, I wanted to ask Wendy actually, if we got an updated flood risk assessment and a flood emergency plan, which I understand hasn't been provided, could we condition that, or would we need a new one from the applicants before we could determine the application? And have they had the opportunity to do that?
So since this was discussed at Chair's briefing, we have had an updated flood risk assessment, and that's what the Environment Agency have provided their most recent comments on, basically commenting that they don't feel that the flood risk assessment has been founded on the relevant data, can't be relied upon, and Mr. Digby read out their concluding comments, that they have concerns that there would be danger to users. And it isn't just the users we have to bear in mind. It's really important to recognise that the access in and out to tow this away is a forded river that's in flood zone 3. The comments that the Environment Agency have commented, it can be tens of minutes that there's any awareness that this flooding is arrived. There's very, very little time to act. And people who have a valuable asset are going to be very tempted to want to save it. So then you have the potential, even if you've evacuated the occupiers, who, again, we're assuming inclement weather, and people use these saunas in the middle of the winter. So it can be very cold. You're running out, probably wearing just a bathing suit. So people are at risk of exposure to severe weather without appropriate clothing, which is in itself a risk. There will be a very strong temptation for people to try to salvage that unit and getting themselves, so even if they've evacuated the people, trying to then drive a vehicle through, hook this thing up to a car, that will take more than tens of minutes to then try to drag it out through a forded river. So then there is the risk to the people trying to salvage, because that is what a lot of people would try to do, rightly, it's human nature. And then you have the emergency services that then get involved trying to help out, and the risks to their lives. So we do have to think of the entire issue. And, we can't, it might not happen. It might not happen now, it might not happen in 20 years, but it might. And that's the situation we have to bear in mind, that flooding is unpredictable and it does happen. And when it does happen, it can have severe consequences, which is why we look to try and site things like this in better locations where the risks are much, much lower. As Mr. Digby was showing on the map there is an area of Branscombe Beach that isn't subject to fluvial flooding. It's only subject to tidal flooding. Tidal flooding is much easier to predict and to plan for. Fluvial flooding is much, much more rapid. And I think that is the key thing. I think as officers, we recognise that this is a really popular facility and it's beneficial to tourism. It's a year-round event. But I think on this occasion, we just feel like this is the wrong location. Elsewhere, potentially, yes. If it was just down to landscape impact, on balance, it may be that the benefits would deem to be to outweigh that. But I think the risk, the flood risk and the risk to life is something we do have to take very, very seriously. And we're following advice of the Environment Agency, who are the specialists and the people who give us the necessary advice, etc., that as officers, we are recommending to you that is followed.
Thank you. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that there doesn't seem to be a towing hitch on the cabin at the moment. That means if you're going to tow it, you need to attach a towing point before you can take it away. Is that right?
There is a towing hitch. It's just concealed by skirting and steps.
I was looking on the end of it, I couldn't see anything
It's under the steps, is that right? Yeah, under the
So
steps.
it's the opposite end, the river end of the cabin, is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Right. So you'd have to, then you'd have to remove the steps and everything before you could,
Yes, we've been told that would take 5 minutes.
would it? Right. Yeah, that's a no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barlow? Do you have any? Nope, not yet. We're asking questions. Councillor Brown, Colin.
Sorry, I've got one question. The council at the moment are marketing a toilet block down the Seaton, which is in flood zone 3, and they're promoting that as a opportunity that would suit food or beverage operators or development for refurbishment subject to planning permission. Now they're doing that as a flood zone 3 site, selling it with that possibility. What's the difference between that site and Branscombe?
Well, firstly,
Is it the fact we're not getting the
the
profit out of
Exmouth
that one?
site is at risk of tidal flooding, and that's, I won't say remote. Yeah, absolutely, but it's the difference here, and that was highlighted in the report, is the fluvial flooding and the difference between that and tidal flooding, which is easier to predict. So it is, yeah, but there are a number of differences. There's possibly a reasonable access from that that would not involve going through flood waters. There could be all sorts of reasons why that is considered not at the same level of risk.
I think the key thing that you mentioned, Councillor Brown, is subject to planning.
Yes.
It doesn't have planning permission, and if it came to us, we would consider it. It's nothing to do with planning. It's a different section. I'm not aware that there's been any, I don't know particularly, there may have been some pre-application advice on it. It will come to us for consideration, and we will consider it in the same way we'd consider any other planning application on its merits.
Sorry, did you say point of information? Yep, if it's information, please come and provide it.
I'm not sure if I heard it right, but I thought a comment was made that in Seaton, it was just tidal flooding. Is that correct?
I said, well, as I understood it, the risk was tidal flooding.
I don't think that's correct.
I thought we were referring to a different application anyway.
Okay. Just a comment.
So that it is subject to fluvial flooding as well, is it?
Certainly past the Seaton Road, because if we remember, we had one in Harbour Road, which I know is on the other side. That probably is actually on the front, I would have thought.
Okay, right. But, I mean, it's always difficult to compare different applications, and at the moment, as Wendy's pointed out, this hasn't actually come to us as an application. So, do we have any further questions? No? Okay. In that case, Ian, we're into debate.
Thank you, Chair. I live not too far from here. I don't have any axe to grind there. I don't use the sauna or anything like that, but I walk past this probably most days. When it first started off, the caravan was, or sorry, the sauna was put in the centre of the green, and I think several people in the village didn't like it because it was very visible when you walked down there, from everywhere, when you drove down there or anything like that. But then they've moved it over to the side, and I think it's certainly got rid of all the visual aspects of it. I think it suits the beach fine. It makes it slightly quirky, a little bit like Branscombe. No one's mentioned the traffic going in and out, but I think it's been mentioned in the thing that was one of the reasons. It seems a shame that they were turned down in Seaton not to have this, because we ummed and ahed and said the risk was too great and all the rest of it, even though it's movable. And there's always someone there with it when they're doing the sauna is open. They have to set it up. It's environmentally friendly. It gives us on our council things, our biggest 66% of Branscombe is owned, second homes, 66%, second homes or holiday homes. And we are reliant on the few people that live there for their visit to have reasons for people to come there. And we're very lucky. We have a cheap car park. It's £1 instead of £2 for East Devon, £2.20 for East Devon. And also, we now have this sauna on the beach. And a lot of people, as I said, it's not my thing, but a lot of people use it in the village. A lot of people use it. Tourists that come here, that puts payment in the economy. It encourages the cleaners, etc., that look after these houses to have their jobs there. There's been talk of Boscastle, the worry of sudden downpours. And you've got to remember, Branscombe's got 3 valleys. So Boscastle only has 1 valley, but we've got 3 valleys where water can collect in a huge amount. You had 100 millimetres of rain in Branscombe. You could have, I have the figures here because I have been looking at this for a while now. You could have 3.5, let me just get this right. I have written it down. You could have 3,750 metres of water dumped in a very quick time. Now, the thing that they haven't taken into account, that back 50 years ago, they built a sewage treatment plant just out of sight, a little bit further up, just outside the blue area, that blocked off the bottom of the valley. And all the water, and when they did that, to protect that, because obviously South West Water, they don't want to lose their assets, so what they did is they put 2 banks behind it that basically created floodplains up through it and stopped the water just pouring down and out onto the beach. And I've seen people in those fields canoeing down through the fields because it's 6 to 12 inches deep in places where they canoe down. So the water is held back. Over 30 years I've lived there, we've had times when we have had 10 inches, or sorry, an inch of rain in half an hour, or 100 mil in 6 hours. So we've seen it there, where it does flood it. But the floodplains work, and it takes it out. And then, on the side, there is a bit where it can go through, the bank goes up, and the water goes over it, and it then feeds into the river, on top of the river. And the river can also get, as you say, quite busy, quite quick. But it goes down there, it goes down the river, and then it has to go underneath the car park, the concrete bit of the car park, if you get your pictures up. It goes underneath there in the picture, and occasionally that gets blocked, and then it comes up and over the top of the car park. But it spreads out at that point because the water goes down gradually, and it's an inch and a half deep. It's never deep at that point. And there is no water that could come down there because it can't collect. It doesn't show it here, but you can see the concrete at the top there where it says the sea shanty. So it comes down there. You've then got to imagine the river next to the actual, by the time it gets across the ford, down through the edge, and gets to the actual where the sauna is, that's about 12 to 15 foot deep there, the river. It's down a steep bank, all the way down there. So you've got to fill that river up hugely. And if you look at, because where it is actually on the slope then down to the beach, it can never get that full because actually gravity takes over and then actually you're heading out to sea. So the chance of it ever happening is, in my opinion, nil. I know the Environment Agency from looking at it, desktop, they haven't been there, they don't know it from anything different. They haven't looked back 50 years as to why it doesn't flood there, why we don't have Boscombe style events there. They look at that and they just go, oh, well, that's it. It's in flood zone 3, we can't allow it. And quite easily, you can't expect them to look at every single one. That's why you have local councillors. That's why you have John Heath coming down there to tell you why this can't happen. So that's that. And then, of course, you've got the point that it's portable. It's not a permanent building. No one's sleeping in it. They're not dozing up in it. It is portable. They can move it. And if you look again where you're saying about your fluvial flooding you're worried about, actually, again, it can't flood to the left because it's uphill. You can see where the big zone, the big zone 2 is. So you could walk across there quite happily to get up to, well, I mean, you've got the sea shanty in flood zone 3. That must be from the sea. It can't be from fluvial flooding. So you're either saying that at the end of the day, because the sea is coming up, which we always get warnings of, and again, the only reason you ever get any, and it is literally the top of the waves, the last little bit that gets onto the green down there, and this is in storms where it's removed some of the actual chalets on the edge because the wind is that strong. Huge storm surge. It has to be a huge storm surge. It has to be at spring tides at the top of it, and it has to be a proper gale coming in there to actually get up there. And it never gets as far as the sea shanty. So they could easily walk out of there. You're also stating about the fire engines, etc., and the emergency people getting there. Totally agree. That is something you've got to take into consideration. They don't have to go through the ford. They can go into the car park, again, still showing in flood zone 3, but never floods because you can't get that far. So at the end of the day, you can go round the car park and you can actually come through with a simple removal of a bollard, and you can go in a different way to get to save the people if that was your serious worry that you think this is going to happen. It's constantly manned, fluvial flooding, done that. One thing you haven't taken into account that I'm very concerned about as officers, that in 1755 there was a tsunami. And I think that you should have taken into account the possibility of that as well, because that obviously is a possibility that could happen. And the last time that happened was in 1755 when there was a 3-metre swell came in. No loss of life, but there was slight damage done. But I just thought I'd point that out. It is really good for business. It is good. It's been backed by the town council, the parish council. It's been backed by the businesses. It's been backed by your ward member. And I, as soon as you are ready, would be very happy to suggest that we do support this. And I know that I will probably be disagreed with by other members, but that is my opinion on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I meant to ask about, this flood zone 3, if we go slightly further to the left, can we move it across? Doesn't it? Well, you should do, because you got on the... We should be on one of them. That to the left is the lookout, which is just under 100-foot contour on the Ordnance Survey map. Yeah, right there. So how is that flood zone 3? So what is all these other bits of flood zone 3? Because flood zone 3 doesn't seem to fit with the river or the sea. That's 100 foot up the cliff face.
Tsunami, 1755.
The letter clearly states river and sea flooding only.
I appreciate the point that land is at a higher level, and I don't know the reason. Yeah, I don't know the reason why the Environment Agency have designated that as flood zone 3, but that's not where we're looking.
Yeah, but it's when we're talking about all the rest of it, like whatever it's called, the cafe and things like that, they're on different levels of ground, but it's all covered under the same flood zone 3. So how it's difficult to make judgment over a flood zone 3 map that seems to wander all over the place. Yeah. And anyway, apart from that, I have got, talking about all this flooding, I have know a friend who was in what would have presumed to be higher ground and had to watch as his wheelie bin got floated past his kitchen window. And because he was on the raised ground, he had to get rescued, and that's in Ottery. He was rescued in Ottery by the Air Sea Rescue helicopter, because that's the only way they could get to him, because he was on one of the cottages by the railway line. So he was up on the railway line level, and everything else around him was flooded, and he was stuck, seriously stuck. and he ended up spending the night in hospital with the fairground. That was a 2008 flood. So I am concerned about that. And there's also, we've been having a lot of conversations in relation to Tipton Primary School. And we have got a flood warning further up the valley, up the Metcombe Brook. And conversations with the then head of the primary school, the time it would take for the message to get from the trigger, the alarm on the bridge into Exeter, wherever it is, who gets the message, and then get from there, the primary school would have been flooded out. So that thing being out on its own like that, all your trigger points, I am really concerned about, even if it is on raised ground, it's the act of getting to it and all that side of things is what is concerning. Even if it was closer to somewhere where you could easily get to it, is the fact of isolation in the event of a flood. And it's not as simple as it sounds that you can you'll be all right up there, because it does happen and we do get things, and the climate change is suggesting it's going to get worse, and we're getting all these storms and they come down much heavier than they used to be. So I tend to be in support of the officers, but I'm still puzzled what the blooming hell, when you get flood zones that seem to cover half the flaming side of a hill, I do wonder how it works.
Okay, thank you. No, it's not the first time I've wondered how the Environment Agency actually work these things out, but we have to go with them. They are the experts. Councillor Howe.
Thank you very much. And no disrespect about flooding, because I am very concerned about flooding, but actually I'm with Councillor Barlow on this. I know I'm getting worried. I'll go home in a minute. Fundamentally, I hope we actually defer this for a better FRA to be produced by the applicant, because I do believe there are ways around this. This needs those certainties that it is constantly manned. Maybe during usage times we need the vehicle hooked up to it, if that's what we're worried about. But at present, we're saying this can't be there because of flood risk, and I get the reasons why. I'm not criticising officers or anything else, but we've got a whole beach there that's going to have hundreds of people on it, hopefully. They're just as affected. It's the same flood risk. There's no difference in that. So someone in their bathing costume in a sauna or on the beach, I'm struggling to see the difference. I get the rescue of the vehicle, I get that, but maybe that's part of the FRA, is they don't rescue it. They rescue the people, leave the vehicle if that's necessary. Or we get it removed during these storms or anything else, that it's pulled back to the car park or something like that. I believe there's a way around this. So I don't know if I can support approval today as it stands, but I do think we should be working more actively to get approval, particularly with Councillor Barlow's and Councillor Heath's knowledge of the local area and everything else, to get a flood risk assessment with the applicant that works and makes it work and makes us look sensible, and we support our own local plan strategy 33 that's not mentioned in this report, which states we should be promoting tourism. This is tourism, good tourism, with low impact. It's a movable blooming vehicle, God help us. So I will quite happily ask for a deferral if we can.
So, I already asked, when we can't condition this, I think the Environment Agency indicated that it would need a better flood risk assessment and definitely a flood emergency plan. And those have not been received to date. Could we adopt Councillor Howe's suggestion and defer this for a better FRA and an FEP? No, I don't think so. Oh, well.
So the flood risk assessment has been deemed inadequate by environmentally. It has not been prepared by a professionally qualified person. In that regard, it's been prepared by the planning agent. It's not been prepared by a flood expert. And it may be that if it was prepared by, I don't know for sure whether the content would be different, and Mr. Digby probably has a better idea about the content.
The Environment Agency's concern is that it doesn't accurately assess the risk, the source of risk and the level of risk. And that could be addressed. I don't know whether the Environment Agency would ultimately find it acceptable. So that's the first stage. And then the second thing that needs to be dealt with is the emergency plan, and whether an adequate plan can be provided will depend on the assessment of the risk. So at the moment, I can't say whether something is achievable, but there is scope for improvement.
I think I'm just reading on page 133. It says, on the basis of your email of the 10th of June 2025 and the additional information provided by the applicant, we can withdraw our objection to the planning application. However, there are emergency planning related considerations that still need to be taken account of in your decision making, and a flood emergency management plan should be agreed with your emergency planners. So it says, we advise you not to determine the application. We did have comment from the emergency planner, I think, I think their comment was that at the moment it would need both of those, an FEP and an FRA, how the proposal would have safe access and egress to the site location. So in a way they're saying it's a case of better information and better planning rather than an outright refusal. So could we defer this for?
Sorry, Chair, between you, the ward member, and I don't know, the vice chair, whatever, that we can get an emergency plan. I just noticed that one of the appeals that we've just had from the inspector about a bridge over the River Sid that we turned down because of planning clearly states, notwithstanding submitted plans prior to the use of the bridge thereby approved the design, construction, location of the flood design, be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning. There's signage. All he's worried about is signage on, to warn people, to say that at the end of the day, and again, it's not like a school, as Peter was saying. I understand if you had to get 60 kids or 40 kids or 30 kids out of school, it takes a bit of organising, and they're small, they wash away. Whereas these are going to be more likely adults. There is only a handful of them. It's a go on there. There's windows both ends. So if you've got the sea coming in on one side or the river coming the other way, you can see it happening. You're likely to think, oh, that's a little bit worrying, I'll get out of there. But as I said, it's 15 foot, 10 to 15 foot drop there to get to the river, that because of the flow there at that point, gravity says you can't build water up. It doesn't happen. It just goes out. And if it's going onto a beach, it's gone. We are making such a big thing out of something that at the end of the day can be towed away, that I'm sure that, as Mike says, between the person doing it, our officers, yourself, and the ward member, you can come up with a suitable emergency plan that isn't ridiculous for the risk involved, but keeps everyone happy that if there is a thing, and there is a clear thing that says, if the water is over a foot in that ford, you will leave the building. You're not going to rescue it. It's not worth it. There you go. That's the sort of thing I think you should put in. And I think that could be done as a condition. And I think we're putting off business, we're putting off tourism. And again, this business tried to do it in Seaton, a better site, couldn't, because we can't agree because we're so worried about the risk. As I said, I was being tongue-in-cheek when I said about the tsunami, but seriously, are we worried about that? Are we worried about meteors? It's a risk, but we can say that actually it's a risk that's so small it shouldn't be done.
Well, it's not, yeah, it's what you do in the event of that. Eileen, I'm sorry, I haven't come to you yet.
Thank you. Well, in response to Mike's comments about, people using the beach and going in the sea, that's a risk they take. This is a planning application. There are always risks attached to the sea. Anybody who goes in the sea is at risk. It's a risk they take. It states quite clearly here that there's a significant risk to life if this floods. I hear what Ian's saying. If there are windows both sides, you see the water. It's not like that. If you've ever been caught in a flood, it's not like that. There is no time to get out. And I can tell you that from the force of the water that I saw when it flooded Exmouth in 1960. I know you're going to say I don't look old enough, but I assure you I am, to remember that. When they were rowing boats, the force of that water was terrifying. I saw a cast iron phone box just flattened by a stream, Withycombe Brook. It really is very, very frightening indeed, and not just the force, the speed at which it flows. And you've only got to look at what happened in Monmouth over the weekend to appreciate that and speak to the people there. So this is something that we would have to say, yes, we appreciate there's a risk, but we'll go ahead and let this sauna stay on the beach, even though there's a risk to life. I couldn't put my name to that, I'm afraid. I just couldn't. I believe if the Environment Agency have said, and they've said there are no mitigating, or that it cannot be mitigated through conditions or minor design changes. Perhaps it needs relocating, this sauna, not against having a sauna on the beach, but not where we're told it presents a risk to life. I think it would be irresponsible of us as an authority who are responsible to our constituents to allow this to go ahead in the face of what we heard. If there's new information that comes, then okay, judge it on that. But going on with the information we've got, it would be irresponsible in my view.
I didn't read the actual, what the
Can
appeal
I just ask Mr Dalton-Aram to come back? If it's information, please.
It's just to pick up on a couple of comments about the revised flood risk assessment and evacuation plan. Comments about its adequacy and the fact that it hasn't been prepared by a professional consultant, I think were the words. It was prepared by me. I think it's worth pointing out to members that the application was originally submitted on the 12th of May, so it's been in since then. Now, to be fair to Andrew, the previous case officer was dealing with this, and this has come to Andrew fairly recently, but I was only asked to prepare the additional information this month, and given a fairly short time frame to get that done so it would meet the deadline for this planning committee. So obviously in that short a time, there's not time to appoint a professional flood risk engineer. I'm not a professional flood risk engineer. The people that provided the comments from the Environment Agency aren't professional flood risk engineers, or I guess they get their advice from them. But the point I'm trying to make is, it's been in since May. There's been time to get this information submitted if we were requested to do it, but it hasn't been. If there is another option that we can kind of bear in mind the kind of time frame that it's taken to get to this point, if there is an agreeable solution, if that is an amended evacuation plan which specifies where the sauna unit would be towed to, then fine. But I thought it's just worth pointing that out to the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think it's not so much the safety of the unit we're concerned with as the safety of the people. Mike?
Chair, I propose we defer this for further consultation with the applicant to see if such arrangements can be organised, whether either bring it back or go through committee or chairman's delegation at a later date. But as this stands today, we need better information. But in principle, I think we should be trying to support this for tourism, the local area, and everything else. The environment, it's ridiculous. It's not a home we're talking about. It is a usage. It is a lower category usage in all the shapes and forms. So I'm happy to propose a deferral until we can get slightly better information because of obviously time constraints and everything else, and hopefully the applicant can go along with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ian.
I just wanted to point out I got to the point, I didn't actually say it, what the planning inspector said about the bridge that floods, obviously, a low-level bridge over a big old river coming down. And he said the signage shall warn users of the bridge about the potential of flood risks, advise avoiding the area during times of flood, and advise users not to enter floodwaters. Now, that's what his recommendation is on a bridge over a flooded river. We're talking about something here that is, can't flood at that point from a fluvial thing because of the depth of the river there and the way it goes out. Not possible. We're also talking about something that is constantly manned during daylight hours. I just think that we're making heavy weather of this. If it does go for deferment, and I would be very happy to recommend approval of this, and much as some people wouldn't want to put their head in, I would be very happy to put my hand up and be judged on this in the future. But should you go for deferment, I would, if it's not to support, I would definitely want this to come back to this committee if that is acceptable. And on that basis, I'll wait to hear what others members think.
Peter? Councillor Faithful?
Do that. Support Mike's proposal, but there's one little question. If we were to refer it or defer it or whatever, does it have to be in that exact position, or can we discuss it at a different part of the site somewhere?
Only if that's what's applied for.
Because they've applied for what's marked out is a very small area right on the very corner of the triangle, but does it have to be in that specific plot?
Well, that's what the application...
Or can it move to sort of an alternative part of the overall site?
Well, that's what the application is for. If they want to move it somewhere else and make a reapplication, then that would be, a new one for us to consider. But at the moment, we can't say, well, we'll consider the application as though they've moved it somewhere else. I'll come back to you, Stuart. Eileen.
Hey?
I think you had your hand up. No?
I was scratching my nose.
No, you might have been telling me that somebody else was wishing to speak. Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering if we can take both of these in. Can't we take Mike Howe and Ian Barlow and approve subject to, and then we've satisfied everybody, haven't we? I'll be quite happy to second Ian Barlow if he'd accept that. Approved subject to whatever Mike Howe wants.
Well, Mike is suggesting deferral rather than approving subject to. I'll turn to Mrs. Ormsby for advice on that one. What's our best option here? I understand members' desire to support this and the amount of support it's had. The question is, are we content to support it in this current position? I don't think any of us is against the principle of a sauna on a beach. It's whether it can be put in a location that doesn't present an unacceptable risk.
My advice is that members either approve it as it is, you're satisfied with the information that's been given to you, or you defer it for an updated flood risk assessment prepared by a suitably qualified professional with a updated flood risk, a flood evacuation plan. There is a flood evacuation plan in the flood risk assessment, but it's lacking in many respects. And if you wanted to, I could list out the reasons why it's lacking, in the fact that it doesn't have any specific trigger thresholds about when the plan is to be put into place. In terms of, it states that operators will monitor weather forecasts and sign up for EA alerts, but there's no daily review schedule or responsible person identified. There's no mention of using tidal charts or wave height forecasts. The flood evacuation plan is minimal. It doesn't designate a safe refuge location. There's no step-by-step evacuation procedure. There's no communication methods during emergencies specified. There's no time frame for removing the sauna. No contingency for unsafe removal conditions. The access egress risks are not addressed, so it acknowledges the sites in flood zones 2 and 3, but doesn't plan for safe movement during flood events or risks of being cut off. And there are communication gaps. There's no mention of signage, customer alerts, or staff training for flood scenarios. Residual risk handling, it assumes low risk because of no past flooding events, which is not a robust approach given climate change. So the flood evacuation plan is lacking in many respects. For members to make a fully informed response and to fully understand, because what the risks are, my recommendation, if members want to support this and they're not minded to go with the officer recommendation at this stage, is to defer it for a further FRA and for a much an updated flood evacuation plan, so that members know exactly what it is you are considering, what the level of risks are, so that an informed decision is made.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, to be honest, I'm not so worried about the FRA. I am more worried about the emergency contingency plan. The FRA isn't going to change. I can't see any professional doing it. It's where it is. It's low risk. It's on wheels. It's movable. It's not permanent, etc., etc., etc. How they handle the perceived risk is what I'm worried about. So I'm still happy with the deferral for that information to be redone, I suppose is the best way, and recommend that, because I can't, in the form just been mentioned, support an approval outright.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say, but you've just said all the things that you want done. There might be a long list, but they're quite simple things of what they've got to provide to you. So you've got a list of what you want. Surely that is something that if we pass it now, if we're all basically in support of it, that at the end of the day we need an emergency plan, as Mike says. The FRA, they're not going to change that, because the blue line's the blue line. That's the end of it. You can't argue with Environment Agency. We've all tried in the past. So at the end of the day, if we pass it now, and basically with the agreement of the chair, officers, and the ward member, why can't we get a suitable for what it is, for the risk involved, a suitable emergency plan?
Well, at the moment, we don't know if one can be provided. Yeah. So I think that's why Mrs. Ormsby is suggesting that it comes back to committee after a deferral with full information provided. Otherwise, we're handing it over to our officers and saying, make the best fist you can of this. And it could be that they will come back to us and say, we cannot get a suitable evacuation plan here. Mrs. Ormsby has cited what's missing. She's not said how it could be made acceptable. It could be that there is no way you can safely evacuate people from there. So I think we go with deferral, and we find out if we can, if the applicants can come up with the required information. Then it comes back to committee. It'll just be a case of officers have looked at this, have considered it's now acceptable, they've consulted with the Environment Agency or our emergency planner. I think the Environment Agency pretty much said it's down to your emergency planner. And then we can find out if it can be made acceptable. Otherwise, we're taking a risk there. And so I'm inclined to suggest that we go with deferral rather than approving it subject to. Yeah, Peter, Councillor Fair.
I'm just trying, I did try before to second Councillor Howe's proposal. So I'm formally seconding Councillor Howe's proposal.
Yeah, you did say you were minded, and that's why I was looking at you. Yep, no, okay. Right, so that has now been duly proposed and seconded. So all in favour of a deferral, for further information to be provided. Okay. Okay, and against? Abstentions? 3.
4.
Okay, right. So let's vote. I hope Mr. Dalton Aram was making notes there of what you need to ask your emergency person to provide. But yeah, obviously there were some shortcomings there. Okay, thank you. Is everybody okay to carry on now?
Yeah.
Just got one more to go.
Yeah.
Anybody need a break? No?
No.
Okay, we want to go home. Quite right. Oh, we need another planning officer. Thank you, Andrew. Who was it? Oh, Jill. Okay. Oh, we've just got time for a quick round of head, shoulders, knees and toes then, just to get us moving. It's not that far up your head, Ian. Okay, so this is agenda item 13, planning application 251409 FUL, flat 1, 8 Church Street, Exmouth, pages 147 to 165, and it's over to Jill Himsworth.
Simon's not here.
Oh, lost Councillor Smith. Well,
Yeah.
just give him a minute to come back. He might have gone to get some water or something, and then we'll go over to Jill. Thank you, Eileen. No, I'm fairly sure, having had some correspondence with him, that it is a different one.
No, I just
Right. Okay. Fine, Jill. Let's go.
Thank you very much. So this application is at number 8 Church Street, Exmouth. So this is the site outlined in red here. So the application is before Planning Committee as the officer recommendation is in conflict with comments received from the Town Council, and the application was referred to the Planning Committee by the committee chair. So the application is similar in content to an application that was refused earlier this year, which seeks to overcome the previous reasons for refusal. So the application seeks approval for a beer garden in the central portion of the residential garden to link to the existing beer garden to the public house here. The previous application was refused because of a poor standard of separation between residential areas and public areas, and this application seeks to overcome those concerns. So the site is immediately to the southwest of the existing first and last public house in Exmouth. So as I said, the approval seeks permission to change the central portion of the residential garden into an additional beer garden space. So that's the existing public house on Church Street. and to the right-hand side is number 8 Church Street, which is an existing residential dwelling, which is divided into two flats at ground floor and first floor, and has an existing quite long rear garden extending to the southwest. And the proposal looks to use some of that to form a beer garden. So, sorry, it's skipping too far. So in terms of the principle of development, the area is inside the built-up area boundary of Exmouth, where the principle of development is acceptable, subject to various criteria being met, and also the proposal would also comply with local plan policy E2, employment generating development, as the scheme would increase the number of full-time employees within the public house due to the additional trading space. Again, that policy is subject to a number of criteria being satisfied. Therefore, the principle of development is acceptable, subject to an assessment of other impacts of the proposal. So the principal impacts would be to residential amenity. So there's a number of relevant local plan policies. Local plan policy EN14 states that permission will not be granted for development, which would result in unacceptable levels, either to residents or the wider environment, of, amongst other things, noise, smells, and fumes. And local plan policy D1 states that proposals will only be permitted where they do not adversely affect the amenity of occupiers of adjoining residential properties. So that's a photograph of the existing beer garden. So you can see there it's at a slightly lower level than the existing garden. And at the moment there is a substantial brick wall between the beer garden and the existing residential garden, albeit an opening has already been made through the wall as it stands. So this is the existing plan. So that's the garden for number 8. There's the existing beer garden here, which is approximately 48 square metres. This area of the garden is covered with a smoking shelter, which was approved under a 2007 application. And at the moment, there's steps down from the first floor apartment into the garden, steps up from the lower level into the garden, and then there's a wall down here and a further area of garden here, which is all currently private residential garden. So in terms of the proposed scheme, the opening has been made through here already, linking the proposed beer garden area to the existing beer garden. In this scheme, we've got a small residential area for use of the apartments. That's approximately 3 metres wide by 3.8 metres deep. And there's lockable gates proposed to separate the residential area from the beer garden area. At the far end of the garden, there's a further residential area, which would again be separated by the existing wall and a new lockable gate. So residents would have to go through the beer garden to access that area of garden, but that would be their choice to do so. And this smaller area would provide sufficient residential amenity space, given that it's a relatively constrained urban site. So we feel in terms of the safety and security concerns, this does overcome the previous reasons for refusal. And in terms of the site elevations, the existing garden walls would be raised in height to a minimum of 2 metres using matching brickwork. And the applicant would also look to use noise reduction panels to try and assist with attenuating any noise impacts from the beer garden. The applicant has also submitted a noise management plan with the application, which looks to limit the opening hours to reduce noise impacts. Staff would monitor outside areas. There would be CCTV coverage of outside areas. No music would be played in the beer garden. And the pub would also have a robust complaints procedure. It's notable that Environmental Health did not raise any objections to the previous application. However, since that application was refused, a number of noise complaints have been made about the premises. So in light of these noise complaints, in respect of this application, Environmental Health requested that a noise impact assessment be undertaken so that any noise impacts could be assessed in terms of the potential for residential impacts to residential amenity. No such assessment has been provided, however, and the applicant has queried how effective such a noise impact assessment would be given the relative unpredictability of potential noise in an external beer garden space. However, Environmental Health have stated it would be possible to undertake such an assessment under the Institute for Environmental Management and Assessment guidelines. In the absence of any submitted noise impact assessment, Environmental Health have undertaken their own assessment, the full details of which are included in the committee report. But in terms of the likely noise from the beer garden, the decibel level predictions do raise concerns relating to potential adverse noise effects. And as such, Environmental Health have therefore recommended that conditions be placed on any approval to limit the use of the beer garden until 9:30 on any day, and shouldn't be used outside of the hours of 8 in the morning and 9:30 at night. In terms of the rest of the application, the changes to the boundaries overcome the previous concerns regarding residential amenity, and therefore the application is compliant with local plan policy D1 and E14. In terms of the impact on the local character, the walls would be extended using brickwork to match the existing walls, and we would also look to impose a condition in terms of external lighting, again to protect the amenity of nearby neighbours. So in terms of the planning balance, the application is supported under Local Plan Strategy 6 and also Local Plan Policy E2, and also support for the application is given under Exmouth Neighbourhood Plan EE2. As discussed, the change could lead to adverse noise impacts to nearby neighbours. And as such, a number of conditions are proposed to limit the use of the beer garden and to also to limit the time that the beer garden can be used for. The proposal would lead to economic benefits through an increased trading area and through the creation of one full-time job. So as such, the application is recommended for approval based on the imposition of the following conditions. So regarding details of acoustic treatment to be submitted, boundary gates and fences being in place prior to the use of the beer garden, compliance with the submitted noise mitigation strategy, conditions to control the time of the garden, a condition to restrict music and sound amplifying equipment, no cooking, lighting, as already stated, details of any brickwork, and also a condition in respect of surface water drainage. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jill. So then we have one letter from an objector, which I think most of you have actually seen, but Wendy will read that out.
Thank you. So Mrs. Dixon, the resident of number 6 Church Street, bordering the proposed garden extension, would like to express her current viewpoint on the application. It looks like Environmental Health have decided to recommend approval of this application in order to avoid any future litigation costs should Mark Williams seek an appeal if the application is refused this time. I feel Environmental Health failed to assess the potential increase in noise levels of the beer garden extension in the first planning application and a desktop assessment this time, as they state only provides an underestimation of noise levels. A visit to my property during a busy time at the pub would have shown the existing true level of noise and antisocial behaviour all neighbours have to endure, as well as predicting future disturbances when increasing numbers of clientele are present. I spoke with a man at Environmental Health seeking a visit from them on the 23rd of April 2025 to no avail, also pointing out how few neighbours neighbours were informed of the planning application. I have video recordings of noisy pub sessions taken in my garden and bedroom, available should anyone wish to hear them. Whilst I really hope, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a... Whilst I really hope for a refusal of the application, I welcome the condition of closing the new garden from 9:30 p.m. any day. However, I cannot foresee this being managed effectively, given the pub's management's poor history of controlling the behaviour of their clientele. My partner and I feel trapped living where we are, as we cannot afford the additional costs of moving to a similar property in this area, given the lower value of our house due to be nearer to this noisy, rowdy pub. These repeated planning applications over the last year, the first of which was refused, giving us some relief, only to be followed by a very similar application, have caused us continuous distress and a huge impact on our health and well-being, and has overshadowed our lives. Any increase in the size of the beer garden to border our garden will effectively make our garden a no-go area much of the time, as the frequent shouting and foul language and smoke fumes will be intolerable. I appeal to the planning committee members present at the meeting to take into account all of the objections in both planning applications and not allow this application through purely due to a failure by environmental health to recognise the significance and impact of current and increased noise levels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. We now hear from the applicant, Mark Williams.
Thank you. The First and Last Inn has operated on this site for around 100 years, long before any current neighbours moved in. It's a busy area of town, with the main town centre car park opposite, the post office sorting depot, the BT telephone exchange, and numerous other businesses and licensed premises in the immediate vicinity, with traffic and deliveries made to premises both day and night. We have run the First and Last for the last 21 years. Over that time, both the pub and the town of Exmouth have evolved, and with the local plan identifying the need for about 18,000 new homes across East Devon, including many in Exmouth, community facilities like ours will need to adapt as well. Following COVID, when customers were encouraged to sit outside, our outside space can become crowded, causing people to sit close together and naturally raise their voices. The proposed small extension, around 5 extra tables, will allow customers to spread out, reducing concentrations of sound and improving comfort for everyone. With reference to the current application, I welcome the Delegated Planning Officer's recommendation for approval. However, I believe some of the proposed conditions, particularly the time restrictions, are overly onerous, unnecessary, and do not reflect a consistent or fair approach when compared with other nearby businesses. I am not aware of any other premises that have had such restrictions imposed at the planning stage. National Planning Practice Guidance is clear that where noise can be addressed under the licensing regime, it is inappropriate and duplicative for planning to control it as well. East Devon District Council itself has previously argued for this principle to be applied in its own change of use planning applications that were subsequently approved, such as the Strand Gardens in Exmouth. Planning guidance emphasises that like cases should be decided in a like manner. My previous application was refused on the grounds of overlooking and privacy. Importantly, noise was not a reason for refusal, and the delegated officer stated that a noise-based refusal could not be reasonably substantiated. The current application addresses all the previous reasons for refusal, and I believe it would be unjustified to introduce new planning concerns at this stage. Environmental Health has referenced some noise complaints, but perhaps coincidentally, these arose only days after this application was validated. The complaints were exaggerated and contained inaccuracies. For example, alleging live music on Fridays and Saturdays when none takes place, and referencing open windows when none exist. To address these noise complaints, Thursday live music now ends at 11 p.m, and there have been no complaints for 3.5 months. Importantly, these issues related to indoor amplified music, not any outside area, and any live music outdoors is already not permitted under our licence, and outdoor amplified music is already severely restricted. In conclusion, the First and Last Inn is a responsibly run town centre pub seeking a modest and reasonable improvement. All the reasons for the refusal of the previous application have been addressed. Licensing already provides effective control over any future noise issues, as acknowledged in previous council decisions. And the PPG even states that it would be inappropriate and duplicative for the planning authority to seek to control such matters through the planning system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Just before you go, you would need to apply for a new licence for the extension to the beer garden?
Yes, it would need to be modified. I did actually apply for a new licence in 2007, I believe it was, and it was granted for a much larger beer garden. This new approval has actually been reduced by about half, but I believe the area in question is already covered by licensing, but as I say, it will need to be slightly modified because the boundary is slightly different.
Oh, right. And licensing imposed what conditions on that?
Similar conditions to our current area of beer garden. So very few conditions on no music, no outdoor music. I don't have the full list of the operating schedule.
What was the time occupancy?
Currently, I believe it's till 11, no, sorry, it's the same as our current beer garden, which is our opening hours, which I think is midnight Sunday to Thursday and 1 a.m. Friday and Saturday, maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But on my time management, my management schedule, I've suggested 10 o'clock Sunday to Thursday and midnight Friday and Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, you mentioned Friday and Saturday as live music nights?
That's incorrect. I currently have a jam night on a Thursday night.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yep.
Thank you.
There's no live music on Friday or Saturday currently.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, Chair, if I can through you, do you own the flats in Flat 8?
Yes, I currently own the 2 flats of Flat 8 and also the commercial business directly to the south of the property, and actually one of the flats, number 4 Church Street, one over as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, Chair, I've got a process question of our legal, because obviously this is your ward, both Chair and Vice Chair. Should you be sitting where you're sitting while we're dealing with an application in your ward, because it is customary that the ward members steps aside when chairing? So I'm looking at legal to clarification as to what best practice is and whether this application should be dealt at this time in this way.
Okay, to be honest with the Chair, I wasn't aware of the fact that the ward members didn't sit and listen to the applications of Vice Chairman. This is the first time that I'm aware of it. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of dealing with the application, if Councillor Wragg believed that she had a declaration to make in the first place, she should have made that declaration. So if for instance, she believes that she would be affected more closely than anybody else because of the location to where she actually lives, if it's very nearby, then she should be making the declaration. But if not, she's no declaration to make just because it happens to be the same ward. Could be the complete opposite ends of the wards, if you see what I mean. And quite often people will comment about applications within their own ward.
I'm not in any shape or form criticising the Chair or Vice Chair of their probity and everything else. What I'm asking about is process, because in the past, the Chair has always stepped aside and let the Vice Chair take when it's in their ward. So that's what I'm clarifying now, is because that was always deemed to be best practice. And now we're in this unusual situation where both are from the same ward, and as such, you know.
I can explain, you've raised this in the past when you objected to me being vice chair because we both represent the same ward. We live in different wards. I live in this ward. If you want me to step aside, I'm happy to do that and speak as a ward member. Quite happy to do that. I don't think it makes any difference where I sit, and I don't have any undue influence as vice chair, not over you lot anyway. That's for sure. But, you know, I mean, I'll do whatever the committee want me to do, you know. I've got no interest to declare other than what I've said.
I think in fairness to Councillor Ragg, I think this issue's been before the monitoring officer initially, who considered whether or not the vice chair and the chair could be from the same ward, and she took the view that that was fine. As I say, when I'm saying I can't remember this happening before, actually, because as you say, actually they have just stepped aside. You know, now that you come to mention it, I do recall the situation that did happen when you did actually step aside. But my view is that if you choose not to do so, it would only have a bearing if you should have declared an interest in the first place, because, for instance, the application's taking place and it's you know, very close to where you live, in the same way that anybody else would have to make the declaration. But just because it happens to be in the same ward, I don't think that means that you should be making a declaration necessarily.
Thank you. Simon.
Okay, thank you for that, Damien. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask the applicant about this live music that they have inside. Do they have to have the doors and windows closed at the time, or are they allowed to have windows open?
That this is inside the pub, Peter. My only point is this isn't necessarily, well, you'll have to explain to me how this is relevant to a proposal to extend the beer garden, because the question of live music in the pub is not what we're discussing. So if you think it's relevant to the application to extend the beer garden, then please explain why.
Because it would increase the level of noise in the area. If you got that and talking and everything else going on at the same time. I know when I used to go to events down in Plymouth, when I was down there, that any live music, they had to have the windows closed. So, you know, there's question of noise in the area, and if you've got we've got all these calculations we've been reading. You got this bit of noise and that bit of noise and the other bit of noise, and it's all added together, and you use the total number of noise, not just one piece of noise in one area, don't you?
I'm struggling to see the relevance of that, but perhaps the applicant could just answer that question.
Yeah, on our licence, it is stipulated that doors, and well, we don't have any windows that open. Doors are meant to be shut. Yes, doors are closed, except for ingress and egress, while live music is being undertaken.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Okay, Mike?
Going on to planning. The applicant has quite rightly raised the issue of us possibly overstepping our mark on these conditions. And being as we've had a Costas Award already against us for overstepping our mark, wrongly, I'd like officers' views on this, because I am sat here today looking at the Licensing Act and everything else, and noise is not a consideration we should be taking into as part of this application, as I understand it. So it would be good to have officers' thoughts and views.
So noise is a material planning consideration. I mean, it's mentioned in, for example, policy D1. The noise is and the impacts on the amenity of neighbours is a material planning consideration. It is a challenging assessment, because obviously the noise impact is the key material impact of this application, and what we're understanding is what the licensing, the current licence would allow, if those conditions were not imposed, would allow the garden to be used till much later into the evening than Environmental Health are recommending to us in the assessment of this planning application. So for that reasons, I think if it was duplicating exactly the same matters that licensing would, I would say it's unnecessary. But it seems to me that licensing is perhaps taking a more, I mean, whether the licensing isn't aware of the noise complaints that have come through, I don't know because I don't sit on licensing, what extent they take into consideration, but the indication is that there have been noise issues, and Environmental Health have suggested that to be acceptable in planning terms, the noise needs to be less than the current license would allow. So in that instance, I feel like it would not be duplication to apply the conditions as proposed. And we regularly do control hours of use for the very reason of noise.
Yeah, that is the exact question. How would you control it? Because I can't see how the condition would be reasonable or usable in its context. Then comes the second point. This year, actually, we refused this application similar to this before with no noise constraints. How can we add a reason for refusal when we didn't raise it before on a worse application? Because policy hasn't changed.
So there's been a material change in circumstances since we last considered this application, that there's now been noise complaints.
I get there are now noise constraints, but the pub hasn't changed. But the pub hasn't changed. Physically, the planning permission hasn't changed and the pub hasn't changed. So the complaint is against the existing pub, not an extension to it or anything else. And that is in existence and with its own planning permission as it exists from, well, not quite as old as it's stated, but, quite a while.
Yeah, if it's on that.
When this came to us in April, I think was this year, Environmental Health, I took it up actually with the planning officers because there were Environmental Health's comments. I have considered the application together with the submitted noise management plan, and I do not anticipate any environmental health concerns. However, if any noise issues develop, they will be dealt with through the licensing regime. Now, I was concerned about this because I visited one of the properties and it was the one furthest away from the pub. And the resident there was clearly very upset. I think she objected at the time. I'm sure she did. She wrote. And she invited me into a back garden. And the back garden, I was surprised. It was like a little oasis. It was almost like a mini orchard, her back garden. Lovely. You wouldn't think it was the middle of town, densely populated area. And she told me that if she has friends round to sit in the back garden in the evenings, it's just intolerable. The noise, it all right, might not break sound barriers, but it's the antisocial aspect of it, I think, although it's a social gathering, the level of the talking, very loud, she said, and the language as well is dreadful. It's just that they can't enjoy the peaceful surroundings of their gardens in the evening. It's more than just the average next door neighbour noise, as you can appreciate. If it's a pub garden, it's going to be, isn't it? Does that help?
It kind of puts it in context, and I'm fighting something I don't actually agree with, if you get my meaning, but at the same time I'm trying to be even-handed and level, and I think that's the point. I can't understand how this extension is going to make that situation, because it's a matter of a couple of metres, worse than the existing beer garden that is licensed, planning permission and everything else. And So we're asking for a new condition to be put on this extension when it's already controlled by licence, by sound, and by environmental health, even stating they will deal with it under other remits. So as I say,
think
I'm
that
just...
maybe one of the complainants, I think Mr. Williamson, who, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, bought the property next door, and I think he lets the upstairs flat. The downstairs is sort of part of the pub premises. And I do know that the person I referred to earlier, who I went to visit, is now saying she's feeling she has to sell up and go when she thought it was her, home for life. It's that sort of thing. I'm not against pubs, and the first and last, I had my first wedding reception there. Only had two, mine, but my first one was up there many years ago, and it's. They've made a lot of improvements to the pub as well. So I'm not against pubs, no, not at all. But I do take seriously the concerns of residents who are elderly, living out their retirement. This one was a retired nurse. And another neighbour, I think the one who wrote in is thinking of selling as well, because it's just becoming too much for them. That's just putting it into context. It's not deafening noise of music or anything else, because that's contained within the pub. My own daughter's close friend actually takes part in the jamming sessions there. But it is the quiet enjoyment of people's lives in the evenings.
Chair, can I just jump in at this stage? Because obviously I was asking Wendy whether there'd been any declarations of lobbying at the outset, and I know there has been a general declaration of lobbying. Now, obviously, you're entitled again to go out and visit, sites and have a look at them.
This was a previous application.
So you're not talking about this particular site?
No, I haven't been up there since.
No, it is this site, but there've been two applications.
There's been two. One in April, and I went up there then.
For this extension.
And I declared an interest then.
Right. But I don't think it's necessarily an interest to declare. As I say, that's whether or not this application is in the vicinity that you'd be affecting more than other people. What I think we do need to now make clear is whether or not you've come with an open mind to this committee today.
Yes.
So that's fine, but I think I'd be remiss of me to not put that question to you, because clearly you've been out and you've seen the situation as it lies. But I think you've given a bit of a balanced view, because you've said that there's a relation of yours who takes part in playing in the pub, and there's somebody else who you've been
No, not
to
a
see.
relation. No.
Well, somebody you know.
Well, I only met him twice, I think. No,
I thought you said your daughter earlier.
My daughter has a friend, and it's
right.
her friend who's a musician. Ollie's a musician, and he's played there.
I have played there, yes. But it was it was a very long time ago. It was sometime back in I think the 1990s, and in fact, there was a fight in the back garden, I think before your time, Mark, and there was a bit of a scuffle, and about 3 or 4 people were involved. Somebody had attacked somebody else. The guys had tried to pull him off. They all ended up falling through the fence, which I think is now not there because they went through into the
I think we're digressing now, aren't we? So basically, I put it to you both that you've come with an open mind, have you?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay then. Well, then you know your minds. I don't. So that's all I can do at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think we have both come with an open mind. Any contact I had with the first and last was quite a very long
In
time
fairness, for
ago.
future reference, I suppose this is the difficulty of chairing and vice chair if you are dealing with something that's in your ward. So it doesn't preclude you from doing it, but it perhaps raises more difficulties than would have been if that wouldn't have happened and you both have stepped aside. So something to bear in mind for future.
Yeah, I think this would apply if whatever ward it was in, If it was, we were concerned about residents who may have contacted us in the past, we represent them just the same regardless of what ward they lived in.
Okay, I think in terms of procedure, the difficulty for us is that the previous refusal, which was for a larger beer garden, did not mention the issue of noise. There was no objection for environmental health on that one. We now have a reduced application, and now environmental health have come in with an objection and a suggestion of limiting hours of use, which the applicant has pointed out should be more appropriately covered by licensing. I do sit on licensing as well. I can't say noise and residential amenity is taken into consideration when considering licensing applications. In fact, we just had one to do with a pub quite recently that was to do with local amenity. So that is certainly a consideration. Councillor Smith, you've been very patient with all this bandying to and fro. Please do come in.
I just wanted to ask a question. If this gets approved with the conditions that are suggested, have we got a situation where in the existing beer garden there will be a certain time of usage, and then in the new proposed beer garden there'll be a separate time? Can I just check that that's what might happen or what will happen if we approve that?
I think that's what's proposed, isn't it? The existing beer garden, obviously we can't impose conditions on that. It would only be on the extended element of it. But the applicant has pointed out that apparently that's already covered by the licence, which seems a bit odd to have a licence covering an area that's not currently in use, but that apparently is the situation.
Sorry, just a second question. I noticed in the noise management plan there was reference to no further speakers to be placed in the extended garden. So there's obviously some outdoor speakers amplification in the existing. Is that correct as well? Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
So just for clarity, and I think a valid point has been made about enforceability of the fact that you're going to have one part of the garden which is currently licensed to be used till later, and part of the garden which in terms of planning, we're being recommended by environmental health that to control noise because it's getting closer to new receptors, to different residential properties that currently border it, that the hours of use should be reduced. And I think if to enable the enforcement of that, I think it would be advisable to amend the wording of the condition, saying that that prior to bringing it into use, that we agree the mechanism of how that garden will be set. I mean, it could be a simple thing of just a rope, for example, or something is pulled across at a certain time with a sign on saying no use of this area of the garden after 9:30, and it's roped off in something to make it clear, because if it's just left as an open area, people will naturally, walk through. So, but I think we could add that to the condition to ensure there is some clearer way of ensuring that of compliance, and also, from an enforcement perspective, it would be then clear for any enforcement officer visiting out of hours, if there were complaints, whether or not those practices were being followed or not. So the recommendation from officers would be to amend the condition in that way.
Okay, Ian.
Chair, I was going to bring up Mike's point. At the end of the day, it's unenforceable. A rope across something, it's just ridiculous. I mean, first of all, they've removed the wall there so that you're going across there. There's 8 foot difference, and then there's a solid brick wall. So all you're going to do is remove people off this 8 foot, and then they're all going to be here chatting, and not being funny, but at 9:30 at night, much as I'm sure it's a very well-run pub, people have had a few drinks by then, and if you try and tell them to get out of an area where they're having a drink, again, I think this is exactly what I think Mike was getting at. That our appeal that happened this morning, where we're trying to give unenforceable, unrealistic things that stop people to permissions, whatever. You can't enforce that. You can put a rope across it, but people are just going to walk through it. So I just think if we're going to do this, it has to be up to the licensing department. The licensing that's exactly what they're there for. If they step out and we have complaints in licensing, my understanding is we can rescind the license if we have enough complaints. I'm not an expert in licensing. But you're the expert in licensing as well. I haven't sat on it for long enough, but my understanding is if there was complaints then going forward, well, exactly like the one we had in Sidmouth recently, where they came up and said, we've had complaints, so therefore it has to come to license again. So, I think that it is controllable from the licensing side, and if you tried to enforce something that is unrealistic, and what difference is it going to make? 6 foot, as I said, there's a solid brick wall there that stops the noise, or is going to stop the majority of the noise, whereas at the moment it's down. When I visited the other day, and I did just pop in for a drink, Damien, before you say anything, I didn't talk to anyone, well, it's only 2 foot, and the noise is going to carry over it, and there are speakers there, that there is music played outside, because there was when I was there.
Okay. Okay. So I think, yes, I don't know. I'll defer to Mrs. Ormsby on the question of the hours, but the applicant has indicated that it is currently covered by licensing, but it would need to make a new application for this revised area. So it might be down to licensing to place any restrictions on that. But I mean, in terms of enforceability, I think it is possible for an enforcement officer to visit 9:30 and to see if people are or are not using the area where they're not supposed to be, that's down to the pub, isn't it, to ensure that people comply with that condition, however they choose to enforce that. Can I ask you, Wendy, whether this condition is going to be deemed reasonable if the applicant did go to a planning inspector and ask for the removal of that condition? Would that be considered unreasonable by us to have imposed that suggestion of environmental health?
It's a difficult one because, I mean, yes, I get the point made. There's already a garden close by, but obviously it is moving, and then it could move again, and it is closer. The brick wall, they are proposing to put some acoustic panelling in it. The reality is, I mean, the noise is travel, particularly for upstairs bedroom windows, noise will travel upwards, irrespective of whether the walls, I mean, obviously at ground level, they probably might have some impact, but not for bedrooms. It's I suppose from the officer perspective, we're having regard to the advice of environmental health, having regard to the concerns raised by who will become the new immediate neighbour to this, because it isn't also just a matter of noise, it's things literally like cigarette smoke and going up into bedroom windows when people might be trying to go to sleep, etc., which you have. And currently that neighbour is far enough away that things like that may be less of a nuisance and will become a nuisance. I can also see the counter argument that the current number 8 has already had to put up with that. But that garden has been there, as mentioned before, for many, many years. So that was effectively anybody who's living in number 8 probably moved in when it was already a pub garden. The new person, number 9, won't have had a pub immediately adjacent to them. So it's trying to reach that balance, but I do recognise that, yes, the licensing is there, and that arguably there is some different, it's more seamless if it's one regime enforcing the licensing over over the whole property. Licensing does look at entertainment venues in residential areas on a regular basis, so arguably should be well informed in terms of making these assessments. I think you could, I don't think it's unreasonable to make the argument that perhaps, you know, in this circumstance, it could be left to the licensing regime, but I think members might need to recognise that it's likely that they will get later hours than our environmental health officers are currently recommending happen in that area.
Okay. Right. I'm not quite sure where we are now. I know what I was going to say. If we didn't refuse on the grounds of noise last time, and it's therefore felt it would be unreasonable to do so this time or to impose conditions, but the previous application, it was felt there were sufficient reasons for refusal without necessarily putting in noise as well. So my question is, does that rule out considering noise on this application simply because it was not reason for refusal last time?
I mean, obviously the officer recommendation is of approval, not of refusal. Yeah. The reasons for refusal were the relationship with the rear of number 8, the occupiers of number 8, and the sort of the proximity and safety of how people get in and out, and proximity and privacy, etc. And the officer view is that those have been overcome. So ordinarily, but in the interim, we would then only be able to introduce a new reason for refusal if there's been a material change in circumstance since that refusal was made. And the officer view is there has been a material change in circumstance in the fact that Environmental Health are now reporting they have had noise complaints. Previously, they said they hadn't. This is a new issue. And Environmental Health are now raising concerns about noise impacts, which is why we're recommending hours of, the noise attenuation strategy be implemented and the hours of use be limited in response to that. But if you're suggesting, if members were wanting to propose refusal of this scheme on noise grounds, I think it would be very difficult to defend in the light of the comments that we've had from Environmental Health in respect of both planning applications. Hence, the officer recommendation is for approval, not for refusal.
No, I wasn't looking for reasons to refuse. I was just wondering if it was still okay to impose that condition, given that we didn't, yeah, no.
I think
we didn't give it as a reason for refusal on the first one.
Whether Damien has any comments on the issue of licensing and planning conditions?
No, that's all right. The applicant has his hand up. Maybe he can come up to the microphone.
Can I just point out that the noise complaint we had was not from the area of the beer garden. It was from the completely other opposite boundary of the property to where the new beer garden is proposed. It's actually out of the front door onto the street and the north-east sort of boundary of the property. That's where the noise complaints have been coming from. And they were addressed as soon as I heard about them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Chair, what was your query then? Sorry, I had an email coming.
I think it was
Do you want me to file the look?
yeah, Wendy will outline. I think it was to do with the imposition of this condition.
So yes, it was just some legal advice on the overlap of planning conditions seeking to control hours of use to restrict noise versus his licensing, and whether or not it would be unreasonable through planning conditions to be seeking to, well, A, is it unnecessary duplication, and should it be left to the licensing regime? or where in the case that we believe there is already a licence involved that allows hours of hours of use beyond the hours which we've been recommended by environmental health, which would therefore restrict the hours of use beyond what the licensing has done. So would that be deemed to be an unreasonable condition, which could fail at appeal and be subject to any successful cost claim? So should it all be left to licensing is the question.
I don't think it necessarily all has to be left to licensing, but what I would say, generally speaking, is that the planning condition should match the licensing condition, because obviously if there's any difference between the two, there's a point of argument straight away, isn't there, as to which one should we follow. So generally speaking, when you're dealing with a planned application, as you have done, you will consult with environmental health, who would say there's a licence in place here, these are the conditions that we've imposed. If you then feel it's necessary to impose similar conditions, or matching conditions effectively to deal with a planning matter, then you're free to do that. But as you've pointed out, you don't necessarily need to if there's already conditions in place on the licence. And the same if it went the other way around and the licence subcommittee were considering which conditions to impose on the licence, they can take into consideration any existing planning conditions. But again, generally speaking, you would try to match the two together so that there's no argument going forward as to which conditions should be followed. So here, if you're proposing to impose a different condition that's more stringent than one that's already been imposed by licensing, again, you're free to do so if the planning justifications for imposing a more stringent condition on the planning application side of things. But if you don't believe that there's much difference and there's not a real need for more stringent conditions on the planned application as opposed to the licence, I would just advise that you match up what you've already got. Does that... Either keep them both the same, or if you're going to do something different to the other regime, you've got to explain why you're taking that action, and good reasons for doing so. There are occasions when there may be good planning reasons for imposing a more stringent condition on the plan application than the licence, and vice versa. But if there's not, then don't do it. Presumably, you've already consulted beforehand and got the results, haven't you? And the conditions from licensing to base your assessment on when you've come to committee today.
Yeah. I mean, the applicant has already indicated they'd have to apply for at least a variation to the licence in order to cover the different extent of the beer garden.
If we impose one today, and then the licence doesn't match up anymore and it needs to make that application, then it's something that's seriously considered by licensing at that stage, because they'll have to match up.
Yep. Okay, Councillor.
It's the horse and cart effect, Chair, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Horse and cart effect, which comes first? You've got to have both applications dealt with, but then obviously you can't deal with them simultaneously. You've got to either go before the planning committee first or the licensing committee. So no doubt you'll have to do both, but you can't do them simultaneously.
Okay. Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you. Just to add another spanner into the works, as Vice Chair of Licensing, I think I'm going to abstain from this debate and any voting, and I'll leave because I could be the person at any hearing in the future that has to deal with any complaint, and I need to keep an open mind. So I think...
Yeah, I will need to abstain as a member of Licensing Committee as well. Although I wouldn't, I wouldn't need to sit on, I could always excuse myself from the subcommittee that would actually determine that. But I was planning to abstain anyway. Simon. Yeah.
Based on what we've heard from Damien and that it's a residential area, why don't we set the tone, leave it as it is, and then licensing have got that gauge. If they feel like it needs to be, then we can crack on. So we're happy with that. I'm happy to propose.
Yeah. I think at the moment there could be a conflict, but it will be subject to a new application.
Yes.
Oh, are we?
We hadn't never officially got there.
We're still on questions. Yeah, I think so, Mike. Okay, Councillor Bailey. Okay, Kim.
May I propose approval, Chair?
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Well,
I think we've had it.
Councillor Hughes, was that seconding? Yeah, no, we can just have.
2 minutes.
Yeah, I think, you know, if members have comments
hour going round
on
in
that
circles.
suggestion. Okay. Brian, could you just turn the mic off?
Beg your pardon?
The only thing I just think we haven't thought about is the rest of the garden for flat 8, which is now, to get to that garden, you've got to go through the beer garden and go through the people, whatever, to get your garden. And again, we're here for planning reasons, not just for about the pub garden bit, but what about the flats that are left? It's all very well at the present time owned by the current owners of the pub, but should they retire and sell that off, suddenly you are left with a flat with a garden that you have to walk through a beer garden, drunken people, as we said, talking this, that and the other, to get to your garden at the top, other than a little 3 metre square bit at the bottom of the stairs, which you need as safe access to get in and out. So I just wanted to make sure that, I know it's late in the day, but you do need to look at these things. I totally agree that the actual noise side of it, I don't think will make any difference. I went there, it's 8 foot. Yes, you might get a few more people in there, but I don't see it making a difference. I just wonder, especially after COVID, when outside space is so important to small town centre flats, are we thinking about that?
So considering the amenity of the residents of number 8.
What you're left with, Chair, at the end of the day, you've split a garden, if you look at it there, in half, where you've got a beer garden and then a gap at the top, and then you get to your garden by going through that. And is that realistic as well?
Yep. Well, yeah. But
It's now working. I did think of that earlier on and actually then left it, but there is a question mark of a right of access to this rear. Now it's fine at present because the owner is the same as the pub, but if the pub is sold off with its new extended garden and the flats are not sold off at the same time because maybe the new pub owner doesn't want to be a landlord, as in property landlord at the same time, can we as part of planning make a right of access through their land?
yeah, yeah, please, Wendy, yeah.
So the way it stands at the moment, there is no proposal to say that that has to be retained as amenity space with access for the occupiers of the 2 flats. The reason being that our local plan has no minimum amenity space standards. It's not unusual for flats not to have outdoor space. They would have they would still have access to that immediate space. It's not large, but for flats, it would be deemed a big enough area to go and sit out or hang up some washing. So I think it would be difficult to refuse it on the grounds that there would be inadequate amenity space or quality of amenity space, even if they were only left with that immediately adjacent element, because they're 2 flats and we don't have any minimum standards of amenity space.
That's not the question. The question is about access to the extra piece further on, because at present, the planning application is only concerning a middle chunk, and the flats, as it stands as the planning application, will access their further away bit of land through that garden. But if the landlord splits, if you get my meaning, the 2 properties apart, there's a bit of a dichotomy of who goes where and can that other second garden, whether it's part of our remit or not, if you get my meaning, be accessed or not accessed and all the rest of it. And I just would like to see us confirming that second part of the garden does have access rights.
So if members felt that it is important that the occupiers of the flats at number 8 have access to the garden, you could put a condition on saying that, I think we've already got a condition saying the gates have to be lockable for security reasons. and that there should be a right to pass through that land to access that rear garden if members felt it was necessary. But then we'd be looking at what's the policy reason for saying that they have to have access to that parcel of land. And whilst I can see it's desirable for them to have access, they might want to create a vegetable garden or something back there. The officer view is that there's no policy requirement to say that there should be access to it.
I think Mr. Williams may have some information here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, obviously I can answer any questions about that if you wish. One of the reasons for having the little extra garden at the top is currently the flat above the pub has no amenity space that's private, and it's intended that that's kind of a shared area for the properties that I own. Actually looking to the future, to the east of the, well, on that, it's not actually to the east, to the right of that is a commercial property that's potentially going to be developed in the further future, which is in sort of currently family ownership, and potentially that bit of garden might end up being sort of distributed with as a back garden to a property to the right of the premises as well. So it's a development area potentially. It may end up not being in the ownership of Flat 8 in the further future anyway. So it's a bit of a work in progress. But
okay, thank you. Even though that complicates things.
It's quite complicated, yes. But
yeah, just turn the mic off, Mark. Thank you, Peter.
Just checking the dividing wall between the pub and number 8. The section has been reduced. Will that be put back? No, between the access and there's about a foot or so of wall has been removed, and I believe, isn't it? And there's fresh render attacked on the end of it, on the old piece.
Are you talking about that?
Where you got the white on the top, between the white frame to the left, and then you got that, or is that wall or whatever that is? That's wall, isn't it?
There was a wall there. That's the wall between.
Is the top being taken off?
That's the wall between number 8 and the existing garden.
That's where the garden. That's where the
existing
beer garden was going to go.
That's the existing beer garden in here, and this is
Yeah.
where the.
So you
this is
got
where the new
the
garden will
piece
go.
to the left is where the beer garden was going to go at the previous application. Now they brought it up to right against that, so that, I mean, there's an issue of privacy in that private flat garden, because that's the part that's left over now, isn't it?
Yeah, so there'll be a new fence erected.
Yeah.
It's more or less on the line of that existing opening, and it comes across here, and it will be 2
So will that be
metres tall.
raised across the other piece as well?
That little bit of wall, where
Yeah.
it's
About a foot.
This bit,
foot,
no,
yeah.
the height that won't increase because this beer garden here is at a lower level.
No, it's low. I can't really see how much lower it is, but fair enough.
2 steps down.
Okay. Right.
Do we need a site visit?
I think the proposer has left the building. So do we have a new?
Yeah, I'll propose it, and I seconded it.
Thank you, Stuart. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Smith. Okay. And the proposal was approval, Stuart.
Yes, absolutely.
With the current conditions.
With the amended.
Have they been amended?
What was the amended conditions?
Shall Wendy read them out?
Okay. Oh, this was to do with the access. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Oh, it was the timing. No, I think Damien's suggestion was that we let it stand at planning, and licensing would take them into consideration when the new application comes to
And I don't
licensing.
want to argue with Damien, but if you're putting in planning and saying it's only till 9:30, where does that leave the applicant if they say you can have it till 11. Which one takes precedence?
Can I just clarify in my mind? My understanding is that these are new conditions that then would have to be reconsidered by the licensing committee as well, or are we saying that there are already licensing conditions in place and these are in addition? That's what I just want some clarity from Mrs. Ormsby, please. I'm trying to look over.
There is currently, I think as I understood it, Mark, there is currently a licence covering that part of the garden, which is the same as the opening hours of the pub. But you would have to submit
So can I just
a new
clarify with the plan?
application.
Did you obtain this information to produce this report? This is what I'm getting confused at, sorry.
So, Chair, our understanding was that there was a licence covering the existing garden. We were not aware, until mentioned today by Mr. Williams, that there was a licence on this residential garden, because it would be an unusual situation that an existing garden already has a licence on it. So I don't know whether we're correctly understanding. So that is a slightly, when these conditions were drafted, it was on the basis of understanding that there was no licence on this land, and that we were considering this completely afresh. So it's new information to us, and I don't know whether it's correct. I can only assume it is, but I don't know that it's correct, that this land already has licensing conditions on it.
Well, I think, Chair, we've got two options. We either go with the situation as the planners have been advised by Environmental Health. It was a little bit remiss if something has changed since the advice was provided. I don't know how recent that advice is between now and today taking place. It would be unusual for you not to be told of that, I would imagine. So I think maybe there is some confusion with the applicant, or we simply defer to make a decision when you get some clarity on this point, because at the moment I'm a bit remiss for any decision to be taken if you've not got the up-to-date facts from the licensing department when you've given your recommendation.
My suggestion would be that we grant the permission with that licensing condition in place and the other amended conditions. And if it then transpires that licensing imposed different opening times, that the applicant then comes back for a variation of the existing conditions, and we can simply a variation.
Chair, is the sensible situation literally to adjourn for 5 minutes whilst the planning officer speaks to the licensing team and finds out what's going on? That might be a good idea. If everybody's sat here, let's have 5 minutes, let's get some clarity on the situation, and then we can make a decision.
You've got to go. What time are you in?
Well, I said 4 o'clock would be the latest, but I'll give it to
But if we can just take 5, and maybe we can clarify the situation with licensing.
Direct.
let's not look like we're trying to do everything behind closed doors. Let's just wait for Joe to come back. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand why we've not got an up-to-date position before we've come today.
Because
Okay, that's fine. So we'll remove that condition. Apparently, according to licensing, there is, as Mr. Williams understands, an existing license covering that land at number 8. So it would be unreasonable of us to impose a contradictory condition.
So there is
So
there is actually one, is there?
yes,
Yes. Okay.
yes, apparently, yes. So, yeah.
Can we get
Okay,
a vote
so we
then?
just remove that condition, Wendy, and leave it to licensing, and they can control that. So, Stuart proposed, seconded by Simon. All in favour? Yep, please, because, well, no, just, we need 4 in favour, because, yeah, 4 in favour, 2 abstentions, as we are the ward members, and also I'm a member of licensing. Okay, thank you. And that brings our meeting to an end. Thank you very much.